Right now we are starting to move on getting XML to everyone, right? Not only technical writers. We want to have XML accessible for anyone in a company that needs to create data or create information directly in XML. So in this session, I explore one, or depending on time, we'll see a couple of use cases where we can provide a user interface that I would say is easier than Word and requires no training for users. So no previous training. That's my claim. Let's see what you think about that. So in order to provide simplified user interfaces, initially oXygen started in 2001 as a development tool for XML. So 12 years ago, we started as a development tool, and people create XML in the text editing mode, directly entering the XML tags, brackets, and so on, angle brackets, and so on. I remember that at some point someone said, "You are a cheap text editing area," and you know, our first version or something like that. He wasn't able to discover all the support we provided in that text for working with, you know, getting insight from the schema, validation, and all that. But in 2007, people started to ask us, you know, we are very happy with the text editing mode. It provides a lot of help. It allows us to edit XML, but there are people that do not want to see XML tags. And at that point, we discovered CSS. And CSS is a very simple language that provides styling information, not only for HTML, but also for XML. So if you have an XML document, you can have a CSS style sheet that says how these elements should be rendered, what information should be visible in the document. So basically with CSS and XML, you can get HTML-like view of any XML document. CSS is a W3C standard, so we decided to use CSS to style XML document. And you got a nice rendered view of XML without tags. Then we allow editing directly on that view, that rendered view. And that was a huge step from the source editing to visual editing of XML. And you are familiar and you've seen the data support, right? The data document looks like a Word document kind of thing, but it has all the XML structure behind. It's not a transformation of that XML document to another format. It's exactly the XML document, but rendered through CSS. Although this view provided enough when you move in the document, you get hints, like Radu showed, you know, you get the outline that synchronizes with your current position. We have a breadcrumb that says what's the hierarchy, where you are located in a document. We have this also location tooltips that help you to understand where you are. Then you can press enter for markup or type for text. And that's all you need to edit any document. But people are used to press buttons to insert a list item or a list or a table and so on. And in some cases, if you have a more complex structure, it is indeed difficult, even if you are an expert, take a table and make a span between two cells on the same row. It's not easy to do that by hand, or even in this visual tool if you edit the attributes or enter cells or rows directly by hand. So that's why we added support for custom actions. So you can define actions. So when you press a button, you get a list item inserted in the document, or another row in the table, or things like that. For defining these actions, in general, you do not need to know any programming language. We provide a library of common operations, and you can just select them and tune some parameters. You noticed XPath for schematron, and you remember that a rule inside the pattern, a rule was activated you had context for each rule, and this was like, if this, then check that, else if this, check that, and so on. In the same way, you define actions in oXygen with XPath. You say, if you are in this context, then do this. Else, if you are in this context, do this. Else, if you are in this context, do that. So the same action can perform different things depending on the context. With the list item example, if you are in a list, press the button, you insert a list item. If you are in a steps, in a procedure, or in a steps element in data or procedure in dogbook, you press the list item, you get a step, right? Because that's the item in that list. And you can do that with triggering different operations depending on the context. We even allow using XLT and XQuery to write the logic of these actions. So you can specify the logic, what the action does in the document using XLT and XQuery. So if you are already familiar with these XML languages, then you can just use it. And the low level part is the Java API that you can implement to have operations that instead of using XLT, they will use JavaScript or Xproc or whatever other language to trigger the actions, or do your own actions. That was, kind of the same level with the Word in a way. You had the document, you have a toolbar with actions that you can customize for data or dogbook. But then the missing part was that for CSS, the attributes are not part of the content, or the editable content. So in order to change attributes, you had to go on the side view or pop up the attributes editor directly in the document. A table or attribute value and so on. And that was one issue, usability issue, right? If you instruct someone, you need to go on this table, find this attribute, change it. They need to have the notion of attributes. For that, we didn't find a CSS support for making attributes editable in some way. So we implemented oXygen extensions to allow access to attributes. And we put these attributes in form controls. And you can edit, a true-false attribute as a checkbox, for instance, and you just click on that checkbox, it's easier. Or you can select from in a drop-down directly, instead of going to the attributes on the side, directly in the user interface, you can just select from a drop-down and so on. Now, these form controls have also buttons, and we can link them to those custom actions. So this support for form controls not only gives attributes in the document itself, but you can make also actions, your custom actions available in the document. That means you don't need anything else to interact with your XML, only the document. The document contains access to content, to attributes, and to actions. And I have a couple of examples. We will spend more time probably on this simplified data topic, and then some that are present in our samples. And the strategic markup language is a standard in US for writing strategic plans. And it was a challenge for me to create a user interface for that people that don't know about XML can create these kind of documents. So what's this simplified data topic? One of our customers asked me, we want to get oXygen not only to our technical authors, but we want to get our engineers input data in XML. And we use data, so we want to have non-technical people, they don't know anything about data, we want them to give us data documents. Is this possible with oXygen? And I said, maybe, I don't know. If you give someone a choice between 100 options, how you can make that easy without having them know what are those options? So, because in data at some point you want to insert an element and you have 100 options, right? Close to that anyway. And you need to select one. How do you make that selection, right? Okay, if you are a technical writer and you learn each of those elements and you know what it means, then you can select the right one. So my answer was, I need an easier problem. I need you to define what exactly you want to get from those people, because if you give them so many options, I cannot put 100 options in a way that they can easily give you what you want. And the problem statement was, okay, then we want actually a very simple topic with a title and short description and a number of sections. And each section should contain a title, a content, and writer's notes. And in the content they will put everything they want, and we will get that. It should be a code block, and we will get that and use it further and split that to get our data information. And the writer's note should be a draft comment. So if we look, my solution for this was a custom CSS for rendering the topic, 2 actions to add and remove sections, and I put those actions in line in the document, so they don't need any toolbars or any other part. Here's a new data topic that contains a short description in the body. And this is the default rendering that oXygen provides for data. And here I can press enter and I have that 100 options, but I can select section. Section is it's an element that says in DTD at least, and also in the XML schema, I think it says everything goes here and also text. So it just gives you a list of elements. So you cannot automatically create a title or anything. So the author will need to go and say title, enter the title, right? Then after the title, they needed code block. They enter code block and so on, and a draft comment. But this is not easy, right, for someone that doesn't know data. So let's back up. Oh, sorry. So the CSS that I created is this. And when I switch to this CSS, and we will look to see what this CSS contains in a few minutes, you will get this interface. Here you have, like a tooltip or a guideline that says if the field has a red background, that means you need to provide content for that field. You can use plus and minus actions to add, respectively, delete sections. And on the title, I see enter a title, or we can customize this message to whatever. As soon as I start typing, the background changes green, so I get the feeling that, something is okay. Tab, it says enter a short description, no more than 50 words, let's say. Again, if I start typing, that tooltip disappears and the background changes to green. And then tab again, and the focus is on this plus, and this text says use plus to add a new section. I trigger this action, and I have the section with the title, body, and writer's notes. Right. So now I enter the section title, content in the body, and writer's notes. And the next action says, after this says use plus minus to add a new section or delete the current section. So I can add another section or delete this section and so on. So my claim is that such a user interface, it's easier for someone, for an engineer or a non-technical author, than using a Word document with templates and all kinds of things that you find there. So how is this created in oXygen? How we can create such an interface? I think there are only 5 things that I customized. I also added, like a new action. So I call this data quick topic. So if I want to create such a new file, immediately I can create a new, from a template, I can get a new quick topic file. And if you're wondering what happened with that check for 50 words on the short description, we can have an alternate style sheet, that will say short description. We have 5 or 50 words, 6. Sorry, 2 more, 8, and so on, right? So you can get this kind of feedback in the user interface. Recently at TCOM, I discussed with someone that implemented a project, and he said that in order to check, they use the wiki, I think, or something. In order to check the limit on the number of words, they pasted that in Word to count, right? But with this, you can have that information. It's just an alternate CSS that you can provide that as the default one. And of course, you can have this check also with schematron, and I will show you how you can add that. So if you exceed the number of words, then you will get the schematron message that will tell you have 57 words, you need 50, please delete something. So how is this done? In oXygen we have, and Rad will cover this concept of frameworks where you package together support for a specific vocabulary. And we have this package for DITA, for Dovebook, and so on. In this case, I wanted to customize the data framework. So I defined a new framework called Data Quick Topic. This one. And in order to differentiate between standard data topics and this, my kind of topic, I use the revision attribute, rev equals quick. So if I said if I have a document with root element topic and a revision attribute equals quick, then that's a data quick topic. This is how I match my specific topics. And then here I specified CSS files that will be used for this type of topic. This is the default one. Actually, this should have alternate equals, yes. And then I put this quick plus just a few minutes ago to show you the word counter. And the default data to show you how the topic looks like when you switch to the default data rendering. Here we have the actions. I kept the style guide actions, the data style guide actions, but in order to add the section, the plus action, this says if the current element is body, we insert a fragment we use the insert fragment with this fragment, title code block draft comment, inside as the first child of body. Else, if the current element is a section, then we insert the same fragment, but this time after the location. Here I can say before as first child, as last child, and so on. So it's just a configuration where you have a number of, we have a library of actions, you can choose from them. This uses this insert fragment operation that takes a fragment and inserts that somewhere in the document. So this is how the add section action is defined. If you are in a body, inserts a new section with that predefined content inside the body as the first child. If you are on a section, inserts that after the current section. And of course the delete section, it says just delete element operation, deletes the current section. And sorry, just to give you an idea of what kind of actions we have here. So capitalize sentence, capitalize word, change attribute, count words, XSLT operation, XQuery operation, and so on. So I mentioned that you can use XSLT to define the logic. You select the XSLT operation and you put the XSLT script, the XSLT code that is one of the parameters of that action. So the CSS, the actions, what else? I contributed these actions also to the toolbar. So they are the plus and minus for sections are also available in the toolbar. The new folder for creating new quick topic files. You just drop here a folder, and in that folder you put the template. The new file template is in this folder, templates quick. And I think that's, I just played to add also support for validating the short description with the schematron. So we can say, you know, validate the current file, whatever, and then validate the current file with this test short description schematron that will implement in schematron the same count of number of words that I have in the CSS. So now let's have a quick look at the CSS so you can get an idea of what's there. So this basically imports the data CSS to get the default rendering. Is this part. Then I put the font size a little bigger, so that was mainly for demo. And then, you know, the description that we have here. Let's do like this. So this description that you see here, if a field has a red background and so on, it's put before the topic, so you can match on the topic, column before, and you can add content with the CSS. And then these are the labels that you see before a title. There's a title label. So we use the content property from the CSS to bring in content in the document. Because this is data and we want to use, we use data specialization aware, we match on the class attributes instead of the elements. These rules will be a lot easier if you will not match on the class, but directly on the element names. So instead of saying here star class tilde equals topic section and so on, that means the class contains, the class attribute contains the topic section, you will put just topic here, or section, sorry. Section slash title, section, and then follow with the title child. These parts where you get this tooltip that says what you should enter here, enter a title here or whatever. This is done matching on an empty title, and on an empty title we can write, you know, if we have a title and it's empty, I just write some content. And similar for short description, the content that you got for short description. Okay. These are the labels for draft comment. The requirement was that should be named writer's notes and so on. And the interesting part is the part with the actions. So how we make those actions available in the user interface. I mentioned before that we need to add some extensions to be able to do that. And we have some oXygen functions. They start with oxy underscore. And in this case, it's oxy button. And action ID is the same ID that is used to define the action. So you see this add quick section is the action ID. Then in the CSS, I say oxy button action ID add quick section. And that makes this action available in the content of before body or after a section. Right? So after a section, we also have the delete quick section action here. The other properties like transparent, true, inherit the font, and so on are just, you know, presentation part. The important thing is only this action ID, and you point to the action ID that is defined in the framework. So that's it, basically. So in order to create such a custom interface, you just write such a CSS, you define a few actions, and they just work. Is that very difficult? I mean, you can have this done in a few hours, maybe. You know, when you are used to writing CSS and. Yes.
I didn't see how you define the placeholder text when you put here
Here, this one. So the trick here was I used the empty. So CSS has some modifiers when you match an element. You can use before to bring content before that element, after to bring content after. Column empty means if this element is empty, and so on. And here, if you have a title and it's empty, then the content takes this enter title here. And if I used after, you know why? Because I wanted to have the caret placed like this, you know. So I put the I match on the element. I put the minus initially, and on the after the rest, so that the caret stays exactly there. But we can, if you don't want to get this kind of behavior, and you just want the caret at the beginning, you can, you know, it depends where, because if you put it before, the caret will be after the before. So I wanted the caret to be at the beginning of the line. That's why I used after, empty after.
And word counting?
Thank you. So the word counting part. Okay, project. So I have this CSS that imports the previous one, and again on the content property we say we have this oxyexpat function that you can use to run an expat. And what I do to find the word count here is I take the content, the text, I normalize the spaces so that multiple spaces will be only one. New lines will be a space, and I get the length of this. Then I remove the spaces and I get another length. The difference +1 is the word count. Easy. Yeah, it's basically this expression.
So we can download that and just tweak it, right?
Sorry?
We can download all what you've done for 5 hours and tweak it for our needs. That's really faster.
So George,
Yes.
why didn't you just tokenize on space and count the number of nodes?
Yeah, there are, we support also XSLT2.0, but you know it depends on on your inspiration basically on that moment.
I was just curious. Maybe this would be more efficient than tokenizing.
Oh. So as with any language, with expat, there are multiple ways of doing the same thing, right? That's just one of them. And now, let's check the time. So we still have 7 minutes. I will just get quickly through some of the other samples that we have. You can find this in the oXygen samples. We had this personnel file where you have simple information about a person, a name, given name, family name, email, link, and URL. And it's kind of like a database record, more or less, with just a few information. And we created an author mode that presents this document like this, so it's kind of, it looks like an HTML page more or less, rather than an XML document. And if you want to add another person, we have also plus action. You can browse for a picture. Here you have a drop down, so you can select, the manager, and then you can type here the home page. You can type here the given name, the family name, and so on. Right? So it's kind of it doesn't look anymore like the usual XML authoring that you expect, where you go through a document. Another example is the travel guide. This is very nice. Our colleague Alex returned from Santorini that time, and he worked on the form controls, and you know, what sample can you get? So, you know, if you look at this, it's plain old XML tables, different information, a lot of information is placed in attribute values. And at some point we have a list of points of interest. Okay, so it's a description, some information about this. And let me put the attributes on so you can see what's going on when we change some attributes. So in this case, for instance, the type of location, when we edit a point of interest, is beach, town, or landscape. If I change this, you can see that the type attribute changes as well. So I don't need to go on the site. I just select from this drop down, and this changes the type attribute, right? Or in this case, I click on this, and I edit the facilities attributes on the description element. As I said, you find this in our samples. Let me try to show only this. This is a space-separated list of values, and is displayed like this list of checkboxes. So if I enable bus here, you see bus added to the attribute, right? So now, if I want to add another point of interest, you can see here also a preview of new functionality. We added support for hover. So when you go with the mouse over some part, you get a different view. So you can then have these actions visible only when you move over that element. So now if you want to add another point of interest, I go here, I enter the title, I can browse for an image. And then I can write a caption here, what facilities I have here, you know, how I can reach this, what type of location is, it's a town, it's an expensive town, and you know, provide some, I guess, provide some additional information, but actually without knowing anything about the underlying markup, I didn't know that this is an image with an href, this is an info, this is a category element, this is a cost element with a range attribute, and so on. So without having any knowledge about the underlying markup, I was able to create and add this information. So with this kind of user interfaces, you can focus on the content and on what you want to enter, and not on the underlying encoding. XML is useful because then you use that information further. But the people that enter that information, they not need to know, some of them, that they are actually enter XML. And my challenge is now create a Word application that enters this kind of information easier, right? Okay. So in this case, with the strategic plan markup, I just want to show you, you know, maybe this part, I added a lot of actions, so they don't need to do any other way of entering markup, only through these actions. They need to insert something, they just trigger an action in the user interface. And all these actions are defined with XSLT. The project is available on GitHub, it's open source, you can get it and try it. The quick topic part is also available as, in the resources of one of our webinars, and we can make that available to you. We have your email addresses, so we can just send you an email after the conference and make this available to you. Maybe also with the updated word count, so you can just reuse that, or use some other form of writing that expat in a better way, shorter way maybe. I only want to show you here that I can, if I remove an action, so in this case, this administrative information part, I have a number of, this is, the content for this is like, there are 5 elements in this specific order because it's a sequence, but it may not be very, straightforward to you that the publication date is after end date or before end date. It's not easy to find that out, right? So what I've done, I've placed custom actions here. So you can just press this to enter this information. And then if you want to select a date to get this date picker instead of, the usual way. And I don't know, we all know XML, but I don't know how many of us, I don't think I can now enter a valid XSD XML schema date immediately and say this is the, write that on a paper and say this is the valid form for an XSD date pointing to today, right? Because you cannot remember that, but selecting with the date picker, it's easy, even if you are an expert in XML. Why you should worry about that? So if you look at this, is again just plain old XML. And I think I do not have time to show you also the XSLT actions, but you can discover them maybe. Or we can get back to this on the panel if we have enough time to look over this. So I think that's it. Thank you. If you have 1 or 2 questions, quick questions. Elliot.
So on your first sample, the body line, what happens if I press enter there? I mean, do I have more than just, does it do more than just give me a new paragraph? Do I have any way of selecting?
In this case, yes. But Rad will show next that you can further customize that. You can, force, like on this interface, you can force only text. So you can give them maybe the form and then reject any changes or allow only the changes made through the actions, maybe, or something like that. So right now, if you press enter, you will get the usual pop-up in that case. But you've seen also at the XIASO, when they showed the reviewer, they didn't allow any changes to the document. So you can enforce basically any restrictions if you want. We also have, in CSS, I think, some form of controlling what's editable or not. So you can force also through the CSS to reject changes in some parts.
I mean, I asked the question because whenever we talk about this sort of user interface, people have been thinking about this since SQL days. As soon as you get down into that, well, here's what I can put in a paragraph, you run into that problem that I have to be able to enter either inline markup or select from a set of possible block of elements, paragraph width, or whatever. And how do you do that in a way that continues to make the interface as simple as you've made it otherwise?
What you can do is basically to add some buttons like you see here, like these ones. So they see if you want to allow them to place in line a number of like 10 elements or so, you can place them there and they can just click on this to enter whatever information. Yes?
I think my question is similar, but it's more specific to mixed content. So if I want to have any kind of inline elements, then buttons really don't help because I don't know where they will go, right? So is there a way to bind an action to say a right mouse click or something?
To bind an action to?
To a mouse click. If you click the right mouse button, for example, then you get the options what is possible to insert there, or is that?
Yeah, even now we can go in the body, which is a code block. We press enter and we have API name and we enter that. It's no problem if you want to.
So that's the normal editor.
Yes.
Okay.
But again, you can also add specific buttons, specific actions like this add insert section or so on that will insert inlines if you want. But again, if you want to give them access to 100 elements, that will not be easy.
Yeah, sure, but I mean,
But if you
only 2 or 3, but you want to offer in a paragraph or whatever.
that will not be a problem to place those actions there. And as I said, with this hover functionality, you see that the view is not that cluttered, and you get the actions only on the elements you move above. You know. Yeah. So you can get these specific actions only when you are on a specific element, for instance.
George?
Yes?
If anybody's actually using this in real life?
What part?
The form, the CSS stuff. So who's actually really using it?
Yes, yes.
And what sort of environment is that?
Even you are using it right now, because we moved this functionality also to the standard data framework. Now if you go to a topic and you want to enter metadata information and you have dates, you will get date pickers. You are using this for profiling conditions. If you have profiling conditions, you can click on that and you get a pop-up where you can switch, different values for those profiling conditions. And we want to further push this for the default frameworks.
I was thinking more like something really simplified. If somebody's actually managed to do something very simple.
We've done some work with editing metadata, so simplifying, adding prologue metadata, topic metadata into maps. Basically switch off everything other than metadata, and then you have add and minus buttons to add various things.
And then we have, in one of the webinars, there was someone also from Germany that implemented these forms interface for users. But in general, people can implement this without telling us. We've done that. So this is just one step into that direction. But in the end, everyone will work with XML, you'll see.